I'm going to show you a few of my paintings, and I'd like for you to just notice your reactions. Remember your first thoughts. I'm here to talk about the privilege that has helped place me on this stage. By some universal roll of the dice, I was the child born into a family of high socioeconomic status. I was raised by loving, involved parents. I attended a high school where 98% of seniors go on to attend a college or university. And while getting my degree, I haven't had to support myself financially, allowing me to focus solely on my studies. And I'm white. The lack of adversity in my life is an advantage afforded to few. And in many ways, I am the girl in my paintings. Privilege is defined as a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group of people. We may like to think that a quality education, regardless of your family's income, or the ability to walk into any room without being judged based on the color of your skin would be a basic right, but our country has made these things privileges. Growing up, I didn't know that I was privileged. The lives of my peers mirrored mine, and there was very little diversity in my town, which was referred to as the bubble. At the time, I understood this term to mean that it was a shiny, happy place full of peace and sunshine where people had no problems. I knew I didn't struggle and that others did, but the picture was only partially painted. There are people living paycheck to paycheck, I'd hear. Some people don't have running water, they'd say. Some people, someplace, far, far away. What I didn't really grasp was that those people are exactly the same as me. An amalgamation of auras swimming inside a sculpture of skin shaped by the will of the world into which they were born. But with further distance in time and space from the bubble, I came to see the world through a new lens. I took classes and read books that exposed the massive inequalities in our society and the world at large. And I constantly saw my privilege reflected back at me through the lack of privilege that I saw others experiencing. Looking back now, I can see the bubble for what it was and still is. An invisible barrier constructed to keep the reality of the world outside from interacting with the pristinely manicured perfection within. The bubble had kept me blinded, and the uniformity of my social sphere had conditioned me into thinking that my experience was the norm. I didn't seek out information that would have taught me differently, and neither did anybody else that I knew. This is what I've come to call the willful blindness of bubble life, and that's the series title of the paintings I've created. Take a deeper look at this painting. Is there anything you didn't see the first time? How about now? Willful blindness is a legal term describing the avoidance of personal liability by striving not to see certain information or facts. I've used this concept in my paintings to point out the state of blissful ignorance, conditioned complacency, or denial that many live in. But when everything around you seems normal, it takes a voice from the outside to tell you that something here isn't right, to reframe it for you, or paint it for you. So that's what I've done. In each of my paintings, you can see willful blindness in at least two ways. First, I used sunglasses, or the covering of eyes, to show that each of us has a lens through which we see the world, one that often filters out the blinding light of inequality around us. Second, I've used defacing. When I first created these paintings, all of the figures were clearly shown. But after many conversations and much contemplation about the topic of representation and speaking for others, I decided to alter all of the images of people of color. I'm not trying to represent their unique individuality or tell their story on their behalf. What I'm trying to show is that the people of color in these paintings and in these communities are unseen, unheard, disregarded, and ultimately defaced. And the privileged white characters look past or are willfully blind to the experiences of the people of color. I'm not trying to speak for the oppressed, but rather to the oppressor as one of their own. We've all seen photos of starving children, slums, atrocities, but we ignore the writing on the wall. We forget to acknowledge that our choices have complicated effects, that the clothes we buy are made by people in other countries in exchange for unlivable wages, and that the disposability of our consumer culture is swiftly exported out of sight and out of our lives back to countries where our goods were made, placing the toxic burden of our waste back onto the lives of the people we've already capitalistically taken advantage of. When people first see these paintings, they often respond with, "Oh, cute," because they've just seen the little girl. They see what's up close, dominant, but they don't look deeper. The advertisements on our screens and in our magazines convincing us we need to buy pretty things obscure the effects of our actions. So in an attempt to denormalize our actions, I've utilized collage to place depictions of lives that are seemingly disjointed alternate realities side by side to implicate an interconnected relationship. In recent years, I've noticed a new trend to commemorate a baby's first birthday, often involving a fancy cake from a bakery and a professional photographer. In isolation, it's a cute idea, but if viewed from a different lens, a strangeness is revealed. There are people all over the world and in our own country starving. Yet there are also babies smashing food for fun. And if this child's parents are able to afford this, what other opportunities do they provide to help their child get ahead in life? I call this painting "Let Them Eat Cake" because the phrase was rumored to have been said by Queen Marie Antoinette upon learning that her peasants didn't have enough food. From this, different interpretations can be drawn. Did she genuinely care about her peasants and hope to feed them a food of luxury and excess? Did she grossly misunderstand the reality of the issues? Or was it a sarcastic dismissal and disregard for the needs of the people beneath her status? I've also used this series to explore the relationship between privilege and status. Conspicuous consumption and conspicuous leisure are two terms coined by Thorstein Veblen in his book, The Theory of the Leisure Class. Conspicuous consumption is the practice of buying items beyond our real needs in order to show or flaunt our wealth or status. And with conspicuous leisure, only those who have built sufficient wealth are able to spend their time and money relaxing. And the public display of this leisure communicates a certain status. Veblen describes that during the predatory stage of society, labor was associated with weakness and subjugation to a master, leaving laborers with a mark of inferiority, which is often how we still treat them today. In this painting, you can see conspicuous consumption and conspicuous leisure, but also the concept of social stratification, which is the way a society groups people hierarchically based on different identifiers like education, occupation, wealth, and even race. Among many things, this painting critiques the distribution of wealth in our society, the belief in the American dream of being able to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and work your way to the top no matter what, and the aspects of luck, chance, and privilege in one's quest to ascend to a higher social status. Every child can dream and wish, but each one is born with inherited identifiers that strongly affect their odds of ascension. The impact of my privileges will never leave me. I will always be white in a society that was formed on racist ideals. And I was raised with the advantages a family of high socioeconomic income can provide. But when growing into accepting the reality of my privilege, I had the compulsion to hide it. I didn't want people to assume that I've never had to work hard, because I have in many ways. But I haven't had to work as hard as many others. There's a metaphor about a relay race that helped me understand this. My dad was born into a hardworking, small-town family. He spent his time after school and on the weekends helping his dad build houses to support their income. And he was passed the baton from this social standing. He then went to university, worked his way through his degree, and then climbed the corporate ladder with the work ethic his dad had instilled in him. And now the baton is passed to me. I'm starting much further down the line than my dad or his dad before him. And that's not to say that I won't have to work hard to succeed in my own life. Privilege doesn't mean you don't work hard. It means that you're starting out with different advantages, and that some people have to work twice as hard to get where you're starting off. I found that by putting these themes and topics on Canvas, that people are able to talk about characters beyond themselves, and conversations about complex issues like power, privilege, and race are sparked. I first noticed this when I made the first painting. I would go up to random people and say, "What do you think about this painting? Do you see anything else like this in your own life?" I wanted more perspectives and a more diversified understanding of these issues. So eventually I started making posts on Craigslist, asking for input, observations, and experiences from people all over the country. Some responses I received were really insightful, like the story a Black man shared about his frustrations that his white wife was able to trace her family history back to the 12th century, finding that in the 1800s, some of her family received 7,000 acres of land for free under Land Acts, while he could only trace his family history back a couple of generations because records of Blacks were kept worse than cattle or chickens. He astutely illustrated and pointed out that Black families haven't had the same amount of time to develop and grow their socioeconomic status as white families due to slavery and racist laws thereafter, causing Black families to be generations behind for no reason other than the color of their skin. And that uninformed whites think they earned this in some way. Other responses had less substance. And some were frighteningly angry, hateful, and solely based on insult, not insight. Nearly all of my postings to Craigslist were flagged and removed, often within hours of my posting them, even though they weren't violating any of the guidelines. And while I'm still posting to Craigslist, I've also made prints of the paintings to hang in coffee shops across Texas, collecting responses there, as well as on social media and through the email, thewillfulblindness@gmail.com. All of the responses I receive are posted to the Facebook page, The Willful Blindness of Bubble Life, and I encourage you to go and read more of them. They reveal so much about where our country stands with concepts of inequality, bias, racism, and privilege. Through this project, people are able to reflect on how they experience privilege or on how they are affected by it. And through sharing stories, we can all come to better understand the complexities of the vast inequalities we face. So how can we start dismantling the willful blindness of bubble life? First, take off your blinders. Stop being willfully blind to the inequality around you and start looking to see how it manifests in your own life. Then, re-examine your relationship with privilege. Privilege isn't just if you're white or wealthy. Every social identifier, like gender, sexual orientation, and age, carry a connotation and a different degree of power or oppression. So take the time to ask yourself how your identifiers affect your positionality in life. And then pop your bubble. Talk to people that are lived lives that are different from your own. Ask questions and listen to their answers. Read books. Follow social advocates on social media. Without your efforts, your lens can't expand or evolve. You have to try to understand the experiences that other people have had and you never will. And finally, say something. Point out when privilege plays into situations. Make a post with the hashtag #TheWillfulBlindness, sharing your perspective. Admit that you have privilege and how that's helped you get to where you are, or share a story about the barriers you have faced due to a lack of privilege, because that's how privileged people like me can come to better understand the full implications of privilege. In order to make real change in our world, we have to burst our bubbles and stop being willfully blind to the part we each play in the problems we all face. Thank you.